What are the 8 things that nobody tells you about a Mekong river cruise in Vietnam and Cambodia? I'm Gary Bembridge. This is another of my cruise tips for travelers. I am just back from an incredible cruise on the Mekong River with Cross Europe on Indochine 2. It had been on my wish list for a long time, but I realized as I headed off there that I had no real idea about what to expect. So I discovered 8 big things that I want to share with you, starting with this one. One of the biggest things that I hadn't really appreciated is just how immersive and how remote this river cruise was going to take you, which was quite magnificent. You really get to see the sights, the sound, and the countryside of Vietnam and Cambodia. You cruise past floating villages where people live on the river. You visit small, out-of-the-way villages, which are really quite magnificent and interesting. You visit local markets where they literally are selling fruits and fish and produce that are fundamental to day-to-day life rather than tourist tat and souvenirs you find in so many other markets. You also learn the importance of agriculture, rice, to the whole community. So it's really immersive and you get to really get a sense and understand the whole rural way of life in these countries. And I discovered, for example, in Cambodia that the vast bulk of the people are still very much farming and rely on rice and farming. So that was one of the best experiences of all, is the immersiveness of this experience and seeing the real rural side of these two countries. The second thing that I'd sort of appreciated, but no one had really told me, is just how absolutely magnificent, impressive, and unbelievable the whole Angkor Wat and associated temples and complexes close to Siem Reap in Cambodia are. I mean, I'd expected them to be great, but I had no idea, and no one really told me just how phenomenal they were, and also how many of these places they were. So obviously the most famous of all is Angkor Wat. This is a big, sprawling complex, and it really is quite magnificent. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. This is the one that everybody knows. I think there was actually even more magnificent places nearby. So for example, we went into an area called Angkor Thom, and some incredible things we saw there. This is a vast, big complex. You enter through this beautiful big south gate, which has these magnificent structures over the river. You then head in and look at a couple of big and important places. The most dramatic of all was a place called Bayon. This is an old royal palace. It is just absolutely stunning, with beautiful frescoes telling the whole story of the area, the wars, the battles. You can then head a little bit further away from there to another beautiful structure, which was called Bap Huon. And this is a big, long walkway to enter, and again, just magnificent. Once you head out of Angkor Thom, we went to another pretty famous place, which is called Ta Prohm. This is very interesting because what they're letting happen is the forest reclaim the structure. So it used to be a really important temple area, and slowly but surely they're letting the forest reclaim it. Many of the other structures over the years, they've taken away all the forest that was destroying it. Another incredible place that we went to outside Siem Reap, which is called Bate Ray, which is Citadel of Woman. Again, a very beautiful structure and absolutely magnificent. So no one really told me just how phenomenal these complexes outside Siem Reap were. The third thing that I hadn't really appreciated, no one really told me about what to expect, was just how magnificent the royal palace in Phnom Penh, the capital of Cambodia, was. I thought it would be quite nice. Went around the corner after the entrance and wow, there was just this most beautiful series of buildings and structures. Also in that whole complex area is the Silver Pagoda. This is still the area where the King of Cambodia lives and basically works out of. Absolutely phenomenal. No one had told me what to expect and how phenomenal this place was. The fourth thing that no one had really told me about was just how ornate, detailed, and how many, in fact, pagodas, or we would probably call them temples, but they call them pagodas. Right across Vietnam and into Cambodia, we visited some phenomenal, beautiful temples and pagodas. The key ones that stuck in my mind, and probably one of the most magnificent, is the Tay An Pagoda. This is in Chao Doc in Cambodia. Really intricate, amazing structures within this place. Beautiful, beautiful statues. One of the most fun ones that we visited was Wat Kampong Tralak in Cambodia. This was also fun because we headed there on some ox carts from the ship, But this is a really old temple, and it's a very rural temple, but yet the ornateness and the beauty of it is quite magnificent. It's not as polished and fine-tuned as some of the ones in the bigger villages, but it really was quite magnificent. That was where we also interacted with the Buddhist monk and had a blessing. Another great one was in Ho Chi Minh City, which was the Ba Tien Hao Pagoda, which is a temple to the sea goddess Mazu. And it's really good fun here because we saw one of the unicorns, which I always thought was a dragon, doing a little ceremony in there. The fifth thing that no one had really warned me about or told me about was just how interesting and how many traditional industries are still thriving. As I mentioned earlier, these are still very rural communities, but there are a lot of really traditional industries and businesses surviving. We went to visit a whole bunch of them. We went to a bee farm and we got to try a whole lot of honey-based products. We went to a pottery factory in Cambodia where they're making the traditional cooking pots and still crafting all sorts of pottery goods. We went to a small palm, sugar and wine little farm where there was this really great big character. He was in his late 60s and he still climbs up the tree twice a day to basically get the juice from the palm flowers. We also went to a rice factory we saw where they made also things like various rice crackers. They made puffed rice sweets. They also made rice wine, which have all cobras and scorpions and things in. And then also in Siem Reap, we went to a complex which is called the Artisans de Angkor, where young people are learning lots of skills in terms of jewelry making, carving, and so just a whole plethora of really amazing and interesting traditional crafts and arts, which was really, really amazing to see. Another thing that no one had really warned me about was scooters and tuk-tuks. Both Vietnam and Cambodia are just swarming with scooters. In Ho Chi Minh City alone, there's something like 5 or 6 or 7 million scooters. And everywhere you go is just hordes and swarms of scooters whizzing around. So it becomes quite an art and a skill to learn how to cross the road. But just, it was quite phenomenal. Once you get into places like Cambodia, the tuk-tuks were also really, really popular. And we actually went on a couple of rides on tuk-tuks. So scooters are just everywhere. It is the real big, important way of getting around. And I hadn't really appreciated that before I went. Another thing that I hadn't really expected was, because we were going into so many remote places, how quiet, calm and uncrowded it was. If you're going to river cruise in Europe, the places are really busy. You're going to often have loads of ships there, lots of people. But most of the places we went to, other than the big cities like Ho Chi Minh and Phnom Penh, we were the only ship there. We were the only people out in the community. And it was just fantastic. As we cruised along the river, we hardly saw any other ships. So that was really a sense of feeling very special and just how uncrowded it is. The last thing, which I'd sort of expected, but I hadn't really appreciated, is a lot of the places that we go to on the cruise are very remote. There's not a lot of infrastructure there, and the people there are pretty poor in practice. But of course, we got to see it with luxury. So we cruised, for example, I was on Cross Europe into Chin 2. It was a very luxurious ship. I had a great sized cabin, all facilities, beautiful dining options, a sun deck, a plunge pool. So we were actually traveling through this place in a lot of luxury. So it would be quite hard to actually see many of these places if you were just a land-based traveler, because there's not the infrastructure there. So one of the things I hadn't really appreciated is the importance of seeing this on a cruise. If you want to do it by land, you'd have to really, really rough it or actually struggle to do it. Those are the 8 things that no one had really told me about a Mekong River cruise before I went. Those are things that I discovered. Hope you found that helpful. I have loads more videos about cruising the Mekong, about crossing Europe that I went with, and of course loads more cruising tips and advice videos. So why don't you watch another one of those right now?